Hello, YouTubers, friends, compatriots, bootlickers, shills, dead slaves, horse peasants, vassals, minions. I am a useful idiot. Welcome. And today I want to talk about presidential libraries. This has already been a pet peeve of mine for quite some time, and I'm going to make it a pet peeve of yours because, of course, Obama is going to top all the rest of them in presidential libraries, but there's more to it. But as usual, I like to give a little background first, so I dug up some pretty basic details about presidential libraries. And the whole presidential library phenomenon is generally a 20th century phenomenon. And there's a lot of presidents that have libraries located all over the country, and these are run by the states themselves. So when you see presidential libraries for the likes of Abraham Lincoln or Woodrow Wilson and Ulysses S. Grant, they're run by the states. But as of the 20th century, beginning with Herbert Hoover, I believe, who was president from 1929 to 1933, we have 13 presidential libraries that are run by the federal government. And this is where it gets problematic because we have 13 presidential libraries, and the taxpayer and the government pays $75 million a year to maintain those 13 presidential libraries. And that seems an awful lot of money to be on the hook for something like that. And so ever since the Presidential Libraries Act of 1955, these libraries have been privately built and then federally maintained. So what happens is that the money is raised from private donors, and all this money builds the library for the ex-president. And then all the materials from when the president was in the White House, and then also materials from before they're in the White House and after, go into this library. And then once it's set up, then essentially it's handed over to the federal government, and they run these 13 libraries for $75 million a year. And papers, interestingly enough, all these documents and everything are personally owned by the president. And this is according to the Presidential Records Act of 1978. So that's fairly recent. And I also find that problematic. So I have two issues. One is the fact that it seems to me that the presidential papers should be in the public domain. The president is in public service for his term in office, and all those papers, everything, should be owned by the public. And I also don't believe that we necessarily need presidential libraries. Certainly the state-run libraries for the likes of Abraham Lincoln are historical in nature and seem far more appropriate. But these pantheons of bureaucracy that the presidential libraries are now, I don't see any reason why all that material shouldn't just go into the Library of Congress and be accessed by anybody. We're paying their salaries, all their paper from when they should be in office should be available to the public. And another thing that's interesting about the 13 presidential libraries is that there's 400 million pages of text, 10 million photographs, 15 million feet of film, 100,000 hours of audio recordings, and somewhere in the neighborhood of 500,000 museum artifacts. So that's a whole lot of crap, a whole lot of shit generated by just 13 presidents. And so, of course, these things are just massive pantheons. And like I say, at the cost of $75 million a year. And so here's the icing on the. Well, let me add one more thing. I was going to save it for the end of the video, but one of the problems I have overall with these presidential libraries is it's slave labor being used. When I mean slave labor, I mean the appropriation of wealth of the debt slaves that goes into maintaining these huge artifices that are essentially idols to the huge egos of these presidents. And to me, it's the same as having slave labor build pharaohs as monumental icons through the eons for the gigantic egos of these grand potentates, these high on fire figures from the past, and we still have it. So these these presidents have such huge egos. They got to have all this crap they generate, or at least the crap they want us to see generated, and put in their gigantic luxury presidential library, their pyramid, so that they will be remembered for eons, and everybody will be paying homage and writing books and waxing academically for time immemorial about the huge egos of these figures. But so having said that, let me get to the kicker here at the end, because now we have the Barack Obama presidential library, and Bill Clinton's library was solely private donations, as was the George Bush library and all the other libraries before that. But this one is going to get $100 million of taxpayer money thanks to the state of Illinois. So they're going to pay $100 million. Another reason why this $100 million for the Barack Obama library is interesting is because the Clinton library in its entirety, even though it was built solely with private donations, cost $165 million. And now the Barack Obama library, of course, is going to cost $500 million. That's right, $500 million for the Barack Obama library. And that means Illinois taxpayers are going to be on the hook for a fifth of that. Seems like a pretty sizable chunk. And of course, the rest will be easily raised by private donations. But that's not the point. The fact is that debt slaves are going to build a pyramid, a presidential library for Barack Obama, chipping in $100 million. And you know, the great thing about the new slaves as compared to the old slaves, the state actually had to provide health care, clothe and feed, and provide shelter. But the new debt slaves, the ones that pay for things like the Barack Obama library, they're even better slaves, because not only are they slaves, but they have to pay for their own shelter, their own health care, their own food, and their own clothing, and pay for their own slavery with interest on all their debts. And then there's more, because Illinois is the last state that should be chipping in taxpayer money for the Barack Obama presidential library, because they have a $100 billion pension crisis and $6.6 billion in unpaid bills. So they have the most disastrous underfunded pension plan in the United States, which is saying something, especially when you compare it to CalPERS in California. And they're broke. And this is the state that's going to cough up $100 million of taxpayer money to fund a giant icon to Barack Obama's huge ego. And I know I've said that it's not very constructive to do Obama bashing, but in this case, there's no denying he has a huge ego, and anybody that pursues political office has a huge ego. So he is not any different than all the other snakes, just because he's the king of snakes right now. I digress. I'm a useful idiot. Don't you be one too.